that's not going to do. We have a long day of a conference waiting ahead of us, and we need you all to be in the best of your energy. So let's try that once again. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Okay, slightly better. We'll get there by the end of the day. So welcome to all of you. Thank you all for coming and joining us here today. We have two things to explore primarily today. What it takes for corporates and non-profits to partner to drive sustainable social impact together. Clearly, we're groping in the dark on both sides of the spectrum. Focused on core people capabilities, organization capabilities, systems and processes that can drive scale and sustainability, and focused on sharing skills, expertise, and co-development of innovative programs. Build a heightened understanding of each other's perspectives, challenges, and ground realities to strive for long-term partnerships that can bring bigger, better, and sustainable outcomes. To give the welcome address today, I have Aarti and Shilpa, Aarti from Sattva and Shilpa from Ficus. I'm going to welcome them on stage to deliver the welcome address.
I think conferences are not, a strange thing in this sector. We have conferences running probably every week. Somebody is hosting a conference or a meetup. So when as part of NHRD, we came together and tried to figure out what is it that we can do which might offer value and which might actually help people, take away something tangible. And we were racking our brains is when the idea of partnerships came about. If you, to just speak of the CSR landscape, as you know, we have one of the most progressive laws that have been enacted, which is first of its kind anywhere in the world where CSR is mandated and corporates are looking seriously at how they can add social value. And today, increasingly, business is, towards sustainability and towards social impact. It is becoming very clear that we'll have to partner, we'll have to work with the community. And given that, last year, the kind of outflow that we are seeing towards CSR is about to the tune of 9,000 crores almost. But that still, if you look at it in perspective, is about 2% of some state department's budget towards social welfare. So it's clearly not just funding that CSR is enabling. Then what else can we look at, right? So, and then we said, it's such a great opportunity for the business ecosystem and civil society to come together to look at synergies, to look at leveraging expertise and collective experiences which can drive innovation, which can drive significant value on an ongoing basis towards social impact. So the conference today is really about how can we partner better, how can the two systems come together and collaborate in order to lead to social impact and bring value to everyone in the process.
Thanks, Aarti. Good morning and a very, very warm welcome to all of you to this conference. I'm going to start just by sharing a little experience which might give you a sense of where this conference is headed. And this journey, Ficus works with NGOs to build leader capacities. And one such organization had been around for about 7 odd years, doing little pockets of work here and there in the education space in Karnataka. And they said, they came to Ficus and said, why don't you help us envision our future roadmap? So we said, okay, sure. So months of deliberation kind of moved into a plan emerging, and they said, okay, it's time to kind of get some funds. And they happened to know a corporate. And so we said, okay, let's approach the corporate. Fortunately, in our old corporate avatar, from where I come, we knew of the corporate as well, and we knew the group head of HR. Very magnanimous leader, very aware of what the social sector needs, and so empowered both us as well as the NGO to kind of, come on, go ahead, and this is your pot of fund, let's move. A year went by, and second year what happened? And this person who headed CSR was the group head of HR. Second year, we have a change in leadership within the corporate CSR team. We get somebody from the logistics and supply chain side, right, to head corporate CSR. And so, okay, so, us and the NGO is putting together the budget for the year, allocating, we take it into to this gentleman. equally dynamic leader, very well accomplished, right? What do you think was his first question to us? Any guesses? Why don't you slash your manpower component by half? And like I said, really? I mean, what are we trying to do here? Are we wearing a cost lens? How can you afford to wear a cost lens when you're looking at social impact? And this NGO's jaw is like dropping to the ground and saying, I have 40 schools, I need 80 facilitators to go in there and run my program, and you want me to halve my staff? So I think with this, it kind of set the thinking on to say, what is the role of HR, right? And given today's context, the dynamic of the corporate coming into the funding environment, I think NGOs are also kind of left looking for answers. So I think a few questions that really came to mind is, so who takes accountability for social outcome, right? As a CSR, do we look for being just the funder? This NGO had to spend 4 months back and forth to figure out what that budget should finally look like and what kind of capability they should be putting their monies on, or at least the funders' money on. So I think it's the time is about right, and this conference is happening, I think, at the right time. We are, in some sense, in transition at a tipping point where we need to explore the role of the corporate and the role of the NGO. I think just to present just a couple of more minutes on the NGO side, I think having worked with several NGOs over the last 3 or 4 years, there are new capabilities emerging within the NGO world that need to be built. NGO first is, how does the NGO leader start to accept this new reality of a corporate coming in? How do I understand the expectations of a corporate? Do I have to become professional myself, like the way they think? Secondly, there are very specific capabilities within the NGO world that are seemingly becoming more important today than they were previous, right? So for example, project management, efficiencies, these corporate terms are probably jargon to the NGO world. So I think there are many more things like this. And the last point that I just want to touch upon is, what is the mindset that we need to have when we get into a partnership? I think the way forward is all about partnerships, because I think the social problems that all of us are going out there and solving, I don't believe a single organization can really do that. And I think unless we pool our resources, whether it's knowledge, whether it's funds, whether it's capabilities of people, whether it's leadership, vision, and foresight, I think coming together and collaborating is really the way forward. And I think with that, I'd like to welcome all of you to this day. I think today is really going to be about exploring what those roles are, understanding what we experience in our own partnerships, and we have a distinguished set of experts and panelists who will take us through the day, and hopefully today is going to be well spent for all of you. Yeah? Thank you.
I'd like to call upon our dynamic Shreya Krishnan. Shreya actually heads communication, marketing, and CSR in First Advantage, where they work on 4 different focus areas and partner with a whole set of nonprofits to look at social activity on the ground. And Shreya's been spearheading all of that within her organization, and is also the Master of Ceremonies today. So welcome Shreya, and welcome to everyone. We hope that we have a lot to share, learn, and grow from the conversations today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies. So having said that, setting the context for today, partnerships are really important. One of the things that we do is we work in 4 areas, as Aarti was saying. We work in the space of education, we work in the space of women and children, we have environment and rural sustainability, and we also have an open I-volunteer program. What we do is we work with all of the NGOs like partners. We do sessions wherein we send our leadership, be it HR, be it marketing, to help them also not just do the program that we have funded, but bring together the organization from a compliance perspective like FCPA, FCRA, and a lot of knowledge in these areas, because the social sector is very focused on doing impactful work. And so what usually happens is the side of governance and regulation and all of that takes a backseat. So they don't essentially have the skills internally. So what corporates can do very effectively is to bring that structure in and make these processes a lot easier. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the keynote speaker session. For the keynote, we have three very interesting bios and three very interesting people going to talk to us today. To open, we have Nandita, who will talk about the corporate perspective as a business and people leader. Nandita Gurjar, SVP, is a technologist turned HR professional. Her experience in mainstream IT spans software development, general management, and consulting. As the global head of HR at Infosys, she handled the entire HR management function for the Infosys group, which had over 150,000 employees. She was promoted as member of Executive Council in 2011. She's a member of the World Economic Forum Global Advisory Council on new models of leadership and has won several awards during her career and was also cited as 25 most powerful professional women in India. She's currently on the boards of companies and is advisor to startups and companies in the social sector. Joining her, we have Dr. Balu, who will touch upon the development part of the puzzle, civil society and the government. Dr. Balasubramaniam, SVYM, is the founder of Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement and has devoted 31 years of his life in the service of rural and tribal poor in the forests of India. Dr. Balu is a development activist who is a physician by qualification. Author of 5 books, he is also chairman of the Grassroots Research and Advocacy Movement at Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, Mysore. He is also the recipient of numerous other state and national awards. He is also an advisory member of various organizations working in the fields of social sector development in the country. Apart from lecturing and teaching regularly at Harvard and other reputed business schools in leadership, he was a distinguished Frank Rhodes Professor at Cornell University, USA. He runs leadership workshops for corporates, NGOs, and the government, both within India and abroad. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome both of you on stage. Following this, we'll have a fireside chat, which I'll announce after you two are done. Thank you.
Good morning. I know that's a lot of good mornings in the last 15 minutes for you. So let me tell you a little bit of what I'm going to talk about. Most of my last 25 years has been with corporates. And those of you who have worked in corporates know typically what that means. There are targets, there is a lot of operations, lot of executions, and more critically, you live quarter by quarter. So from there, in the last 2 years, I have taken a break to move into what I call as the social sector and in the sector of startups. And for me, this is a much more tremendous learning than has been, in the last few years, largely because of how things have changed dynamically in the marketplace. However, in both the avatars of my work life, one of the things which is key and for me has been the quote which says that no man is an island. Right? Regardless of where you exist, whether you're in a corporate, whether you're in a social sector, whether you're in a startup, or whether you are functioning as an individual consultant, the fact of the matter is that you are dependent on an ecosystem. And pretending that coming to work and doing your job is enough is living in a fool's paradise. Some of us get this realization early, some of us take many, many years to get there. Like most people in organizations, I typically came in believing that, my job is to complete the targets and the goals which I achieved. As you grow more senior in the organization, you get more strategic, and therefore you suddenly realize that the job of creating the ecosystem also sometimes exists with you. Let me give you a couple of examples. In the year 1995 to 97, when the IT industry was just sort of getting its feet, we suddenly realized that there are not enough engineering colleges which could feed an IT industry at that point of time. I'm not even talking about a sustainable workforce which is capable enough to be part of the IT industry. I'm still talking about just number of engineering colleges which can feed a new line of industry. Now, whose job is it to identify this and ensure that this happens? So typically one would say, the government, somebody from academia, colleges, anyone but the corporate, because the corporate's job is to create jobs and ensure that, business runs. We found that if we did not get into working with the government and working with colleges to make them understand that there is an absolutely new industry which is coming up, we ourselves would not be able to survive. And some of you who have worked in the IT industry where there's a lot of data thrown, would realize that the road of coming to a dead end was much closer than we thought, a maximum of 3 years. And by then, by the way, we were projecting very, very lean numbers. It wasn't even, nobody predicted the Y2K, nobody predicted, the big boom of the IT industry. And when companies approached the government, they would be very casual in saying, there is so much of unemployment, even among the engineering students who are graduating every year. Are you kidding us if you're saying that we need to get more? I mean, what will this mean? Honestly, again, there you don't have answers, because it is a truth, there is a lot of unemployment, but you still need colleges which would take at least the next 5 years to be able to produce, good enough people for a different industry. In 2002, I remember being tasked with the goal of saying, find out why the colleges are producing students whom we have to train for 9 months after they join us. Right? Again, not a happy task. You go and approach the colleges, and I'm talking of a range of colleges, whether they were government colleges or the top engineering colleges. All of them consistently had one single answer, and that is, we produce students for knowledge and not for employment. This really got me. I said, what does this even mean? I mean, when you produce knowledge, isn't that supposed to be applied somewhere? They said, I'm sorry, that's not our problem. Okay, we will give them the same curriculum which has been signed, and we are not producing them for one particular industry, which is fair enough. Now, whose problem does this become? Right? So all the IT industries which started at that point of time started training the people who had joined for anything from 6 to 9 months. So most of the costs were the people costs, not in terms of salary, but in terms of training. Now the question is whose job it is, and there were no answers again. Over a period of time, consistently, when we went back to some of the colleges, they were good enough to say that, okay, how can you help us? And we said, okay, we will create what we believe is the IT curriculum, and we will train your teachers for 6 to 8 weeks so that they can take this curriculum back. Some of the colleges, when they took it back to students, they said, now on whose time are you going to be training this new curriculum? Because it's not part of the original curriculum, which means there is going to be extra classes, which means who pays these teachers for extra classes? And should the students who have paid their fees actually pay something for extra classes? Now, the reason I'm elaborating this in detail is when you think of solving a problem, there are multiple levels of issues which come into the fore. What it requires, therefore, is a dedicated group which will consistently go and say that I'm going to tackle each of these issues. It need not be your issue at all. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that the stakeholders in all of these, the beneficiaries of all of these, have to be very critical stakeholders in making sure that there is a solution which is formed. So what did companies like Infosys do? They said all the colleges which adapt this curriculum, we hope will pass the technical test much better, and therefore we will come to campus to hire from them, and the rest, of course, as they say, is history, because the minute colleges started producing students who got into top companies like Wipro, Infosys, and TCS, Parents were putting their children into those colleges. People said, we will raise up the fees. The teachers said, we will now start teaching the curriculum. And of course, people moved to what they called as something more applicable to IT. Similarly, the thought of sustainability at schools and colleges, where, the fear became that what if students decide that IT is not a cool career anymore? And therefore, organizations in IT started ensuring that schools got aware of what IT meant and what those jobs meant. Net, it came to us as a realization that there are many, many issues. And I can talk about, say, for example, the building of the flyover at Silk Board, which connected, the Silk Board to Electronic City, was one of the worst nightmares for most of IT people, because most of the IT companies were in the Electronic City, and it took 2 hours as a one-way to get to